So I keep thinking about this idea of kind of exploring, I guess, like a video diary of my meditation and spiritual practices. And I go back and forth on it because I'm kind of navigating the element of ego and performance, and it's one of the reasons why it feels really important to me to explore it on video. And because when I'm exploring meditation and other spiritual practices in my own kind of private space, it's good. It does a lot for me. But it becomes like isolated from the rest of the world. And I'm doing my best to integrate all aspects of life into being more mindful, more intentional, more tuned in with, or more aligned with my own inner sense of truth. And it's difficult in the world around other human beings in particular. And I think because we all come from societal conditioning, the ways that we were raised by our parents, trauma in our lives, and what's going on politically, what's going on financially, whatever kind of struggle it is that each human being is kind of going through, is kind of like where their mind is kind of set in this pinpoint idea of how the world is or how the world works. It can be really difficult to not get sucked up in that. And I think at the same time, I don't want to be cut off from those realities of human existence, that experience of what we're going through. And it comes down to, sometimes it's something as simple as, hey, how are you? This is a brief conversation I had earlier today, and one that many of us has had in one way or another, about the fact that we often just say, I'm good, when in fact that might not be how you're feeling. It's more of a just kind of a ritualistic greeting of, hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Like, and move on. But then when do we know when is it an appropriate time to just genuinely be tuned in with what my experience is? What am I experiencing right now? What's going through my mind? What are my emotions like? What's happening in my physical body? Because we can get into that conversation if you want to get into that. But that's not what everybody's looking for. And so, I don't want to force truth onto people who aren't interested. And at the same time, I don't want to ever feel like I have to deny my truth, deny my experience. It cuts me off from the value of experience, of being a human being, of existing at all. And these are the kinds of things that I'm interested in exploring. and other people have other interests. So and this is part of it. This is part of the experience of exploring truth, is constantly reminding myself to come back to feeling and experiencing what's happening in my physical body. And I like this technique because it gets me out of the stories that I tell myself that have been created from my conditioning, my upbringing, my traumas, etc. And it gets me more into what is true right now in this moment. And I start to see all the ways in which my body is tense. What am I resisting? What experience am I not allowing my body and mind to have? Because somewhere along the line I learned that this is an unpleasant experience and therefore I don't want it, and so I just do what I can to ignore it. Pretend that there isn't a problem, or there isn't some discomfort, there isn't some pain that I'm needing to process. And we all need breaks. We all need breaks from processing and healing and all of that. You need to just fucking rest. You need to just fucking relax. So I feel like that's one of the kind of ways that I get stuck in my own exploration, is that I'm pushing myself constantly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I kind of go through this feeling of going beyond resting to just being flat out in denial of what's happening, what I'm experiencing, and what I need to do in order to sit with it and to face it and to take care of it. And I'm a very I'm very much focused on my own personal experience a lot of the time, which gets me into exploring my feelings around narcissism and selfishness. Because it is my genuine belief that in order to be of any valuable service to anyone, in truth, that I have to be also taking good care of myself. Yet the fear that I'm being selfish, that I'm being narcissistic, has guided a lot of my decisions in the past, whether in romantic relationships or work situations or whatever, any sort of interaction. I've focused my mind on wanting to either take care of other people, and not just like in a romantic setting, but just like if I pick up on if somebody is feeling uncomfortable socially, that I take it upon myself to find a way to include them or to make them feel better, or to try to kind of be a host of sorts. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that can be very valuable. But the problem becomes that if I'm not aligned with my own truth of what it is that I need, of my own personal experience, that I forget to take care of myself. I'm going outside of myself to fix somebody else's problem when that's not what needs to be done. Nobody needs me to fix them. Nobody needs anyone to fix them. Because it's all somehow oh man. See, this is potentially getting into shit that are going to bring up a lot of conflict for people. And so this is from my own personal exploration. It's not a telling people what they should or shouldn't do. So I want to be clear on that. Anything that I say, this is about me exploring my own truth. And if something resonates with you, or something ignites your curiosity, and even if it ignites a sense of discomfort, if you feel resistance to something I say, I invite you to spend some time with that experience. Why? Why am I resisting this idea or this feeling? Why doesn't that feel good to me? Versus just flat out rejecting it. And at the same time, you do not have to do that. I'm not asking anybody to do any work that they're not interested in doing, or exploring ideas that they're not interested in exploring. This is my own exploration. And if you feel curious, if you feel interested in exploring the things that I talk about, you are welcome to explore them, obviously. I have no control over what you do. But if you want to know more, if you want to ask questions, that's always I invite conversation around these ideas. But also at the same time, I don't want it to become a debate. This is not about what is morally right or wrong. I actually think that focusing so much on right and wrong is what creates a lot of the wrong. Because when we focus so much on what is bad, what is evil, what is not good, what is harmful, it's easy to alienate people, to see them as bad or evil. And I don't think that gets us closer to truth. And that's what I'm interested interested in exploring for myself what resonates with truth in the core of my being. And this changes, it evolves, it grows. My favorite spiritual teacher is Ram Dass, and he often quotes Gandhi, who was leading a march in protest of the British, and during, one of the first days of this march, this protest that he had, kind of organized, he suddenly realized that this isn't aligned with truth. And he said, when he said that he couldn't do it, that he didn't want to do it, people were saying, people have left their jobs to come here and be here, and you've got to, lead this and all of this. And he said, my commitment is to truth, not to consistency. And I think it's really important. We're ever changing, ever evolving. So it's hard to get stuck in any one ideology of good and bad, because it keeps you stuck, keeps you isolated in this idea of right and wrong. And if I want to explore true healing, I have to learn how to explore the ways in which I harm myself with these ideas of good and bad. Because it's all based on my conditioning, my upbringing, my trauma, fear and anxiety that are created about my ideas of how the world works or how it should work, when the world is an infinite, constantly changing and evolving, seemingly conscious exploration of life. And it's okay to have the things that are important to you, the things that the ways in which you would like to contribute to doing what you think is right for the world. But it's easy to get caught up in being righteous. That it's more about elevating your ego rather than genuinely working to make things better. And again, better is based on who you ask. And so I think it's important to recognize that just because somebody has a different ideology or a different way of looking at things, it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means they had different conditioning, different experiences growing up. If I was raised by different parents, how would I be different? And there are ways in which I bring my own uniqueness, regardless of conditioning. But then, you can explore other I don't know, all sorts of different theologies or philosophies around, nature versus nurture and all of that. But I'm not so much interested in, again, philosophical debates. It gets too easy to be about I'm right, you're wrong, or something like that, or trying to prove something. And I think that's where I find dissonance between a lot of the scientific community, which I'm not anti-science. But it so often becomes about what you can prove versus just valuing the experience of where you are, what you're doing, how your life is for you, and your connection to spirit. Whether or not it can be proved or not doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The things that I experience, that this body-mind experiences, are meaningful to me based on my own experience. So I can't prove it. I can't explain it away in a way that is I feel like I'm getting away from myself. I'm getting away from truth here. I'm going into defense mode, which is not. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of bullshit in the world. There's a lot of bullshit in the world. And it's easy to then point to that bullshit and say, well, it's all bullshit unless you believe blank, fill in the blank. That this is the one right way of being. But I believe, me personally, that the universe is this consciously growing and evolving thing. And you can call that God. You could call it, I don't know, just nature. Any way we hold too tightly to our ideas of how we think the world works, I think, holds us back. And we may think we understand, And there's certain things, you can test, you can see, okay, this works, this makes sense. But that doesn't account for everything that exists in the universe. There's always going to be more. It's infinite, it's infinite, it's infinite. There's always more and more and more and more and more. So one method of exploration of life is to try to understand as much as possible. And another way is to let go of any understanding. And then there's also just kind of like flowing back and forth, being interested and fascinated in something. There's nothing wrong with knowledge. And I think one of the reasons why we kind of have that idea of like the spiritual world or religious world being like anti-knowledge, anti-science, is because of a miscommunication, a misunderstanding. And here's my personal interpretation of this. Okay, so a lot of people, I remember, and I didn't grow up religious. I wasn't raised in a Christian household. However, there are lots of Christian influences in the society in which I was raised. And so little bits, it all seeps in. So I picked up on this story of the Garden of Eden, of Adam and Eve, and the tree of knowledge. And that when Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, that she disobeyed God's orders or whatever, and that was original sin. And I haven't read much of the Bible at all, but I have read this one story at least. And it's not the tree of knowledge, and I'm sure plenty of people know this, but if anybody also had the understanding that I did, I believe that it was the tree of knowledge that she ate from. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's what it says in the Bible. And I should probably go get a Bible and point at it. My understanding of the significance of that is that it's when we think we know what is good and what is evil, we are creating good and evil. Adam and Eve were naked in the Garden of Eden, very happy, and then suddenly they eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then suddenly they're like, oh no, I'm naked, this is bad. And they cover themselves up. They suddenly think that there's something wrong with them for being naked. And that creates good and evil.